All right, let's go ahead and get started with our webinar, which is titled Level Up Your Job Search with AI, Going Beyond the Basics. Here's a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. First, we'll compare the abilities of ChatGPT and Google's Gemini. Those are the two main tools we're going to focus on. And we'll discuss when it's best to use each one and some tips and best practices for actually using them. And I do want to take a moment here to emphasize that we are focusing on the free version of these tools for the sake of accessibility. Most AI tools out there have a free and a paid or premium version, but in order for this information to be relevant and accessible to everyone, I am only focusing on using the free versions of these tools. So I just wanted to make that clear before we really dive into the webinar. But then after we compare the abilities of ChatGPT and Google's Gemini, we will talk about using AI tools to conduct your job search research, which can help provide you with some clarity at the beginning of your search and allow you to operate from a well-informed position. Next, we will discuss some creative ways that AI tools can be used to support your networking efforts. We will also talk about how you can use AI tools to enhance your application materials, primarily your resume and your cover letter. And then we will finish out our main presentation by talking about some strategies for using AI tools to help you prepare for interviews before ending our webinar with our live audience Q&A so that you can ask your questions directly with one of our career experts. Okay, so let's begin by looking at some of the similarities and differences between ChatGPT and Google's Gemini. So the information on this slide focuses primarily on their differences, the differences between these two tools, but let's actually start with their similarities. Both ChatGPT and Gemini fall into the large language model classification of AI tools. That means that they can understand and generate a wide variety of text and perform tasks like answering questions in a thorough and informative way, analyzing and summarizing text for you, and writing different kinds of text-based content. But Gemini is also an AI search tool because it is integrated with Google Search. Both of these tools are also considered to be generative pre-trained transformers, which is actually where the GPT in ChatGPT comes from. And they were trained on massive amounts of text and code to be able to understand and respond to human input. And honestly, using either one of these tools feels a lot like having a text conversation with another person, just an incredibly intelligent person with access to massive amounts of information. And another cool feature of both of these tools is that they can remember the full range of your conversation up to that point and can respond to follow-up prompts easily and effectively, which is a huge advantage, and we'll talk more about that later. Now, in terms of some of their differences, one of the main differences worth noting is that for the free versions of both of these tools, only Gemini is able to consistently access real-time information from the internet. However, if you upgraded to the premium version of ChatGPT, which is called ChatGPT Plus, you would have this kind of real-time information. And what I mean by when I say consistently access real-time information is that there is a little bit of a caveat here in that the company that runs ChatGPT, they did recently release an open version of their paid framework for their free users, but it does have limitations on it, like only being able to send a set number of prompts each day before you're then switched back to the free framework. So you have some limited access to browsing tools through ChatGPT. But for just the sake of simplicity, and because we are focusing on the free versions of both these tools, like I previously mentioned, we're going to say that, if you want that consistent, real-time, up-to-date access to data on the internet, then Gemini is your best bet. And another nice aspect of Gemini, as opposed to ChatGPT, is that Gemini can cite its sources for you and provide you with related search links if you want to explore other resources through a Google search. And as I mentioned before, both tools are capable of answering questions and generating text, but ChatGPT does tend to be more detailed and thorough, whereas Gemini will be more concise. A nice aspect of Gemini, though, is that it will often offer you additional related information that you didn't necessarily ask for, but can be helpful based on the topic that you did initially ask about. ChatGPT will do this occasionally, but Gemini does it with much more regularity. ChatGPT, though, does tend to be better at analyzing and summarizing text like job descriptions or articles and providing a comprehensive summation of its findings. Gemini isn't necessarily bad at this, but ChatGPT does seem to do it more effectively. Really, though, at the end of the day, I enjoy using both of these tools, and they can both be incredibly useful as your, job search assistant. So I typically recommend to people that they kind of use them in tandem, use them at the same time, and then just sort of mix and match the results, because it never hurts to have two perspectives to kind of compare to one another. Okay, so in terms of best practices, first and foremost, I want to emphasize that you really should be using AI tools to assist and support your own work, not using them to do all the work for you or to replace you entirely. And what I mean is that it can be really helpful to use them to, for example, like generate sample resumes or brainstorm ideas for your resume or your cover letter to kind of help you break through your writer's block. But I do not recommend, submitting a resume or a cover letter that was completely generated by one of these tools. And there's a couple reasons for this. It's going to sound different from your own writing. It's not going to have your same kind of style and tone of writing. Plus, they don't have direct insight into all the things that you've done, so they can give you inaccurate or sometimes totally fabricated information. And it's kind of, you can almost think of it as being similar to as if you were using like a resume writing service. It's still good practice to review and edit the work that they produce for you to ensure accuracy and inject your own style and tone into the writing. And another good example of where you should exercise some caution is in summarizing like job descriptions. I love to use AI tools to summarize job descriptions, but I then still make sure that I'm actually reading the job description myself rather than simply relying on the AI tools analysis alone, because I want to be able to check for accuracy there. And you do also want to make sure that you're being, cautious with the information that you share with different AI tools, because there is still some uncertainty around, how your data might be stored or potentially shared. So for example, as a safety precaution, if you were to like paste your resume into one of these tools, it's smart to first remove your name, remove your contact information, and any other potentially kind of sensitive or personal details. And I don't say any of this to dissuade you from using these tools. It's just important to use them both safely and appropriately. But with that, disclaimer of sorts kind of out of the way, let's now talk about some other best practices. One of the most important things to keep in mind when using AI tools is that clarity and context are extremely important. That means that, using effective prompts is essential. Really, the quality of the output you can get from these AI tools depends tremendously on the quality of your prompts. And I will make sure to share some sample prompts that you can use throughout this webinar. But it can also be really beneficial, like we've kind of touched on a little bit already, to ask, like solid follow-up questions or give the AI tool, additional prompts to kind of keep your conversation going, open up, new avenues of interest as you, learn about different topics and explore different concepts. I mentioned this before, but like the AI tool remembers your conversation, as you go along. So it's really easy to say something like, let me clarify. What I meant was that I wanted you to do X, or you could say, like, that's really helpful information. Can you tell me more about why? This is one of the areas where AI tools kind of really beat your typical search engine, because you can continue having that conversation with it to learn more or improve the accuracy of the output you're looking for without having to start all over from scratch. So that's a really nice feature of these tools. And then another good practice for using these tools is to try out different kind of like prompt formats, some of which are listed here on this slide. Persona prompting, for example, this is when you ask the AI tool to act as a specific type of role in order to perform a specific type of task in a specific type of way. So you could say, for example, I want you to act as a resume reviewer, which would be the role, and review the following resume, which would be the task, and provide me a list of suggestions, which would be the format of how I can improve my bullet points. This format or style of prompting provides specific context and clarity for the AI tool regarding how you want it to behave and what you want it to do. The next one there is audience persona. This is where you ask a question or give a prompt, but also include some context about the specific audience you want the response to be targeted to, which, for example, this is really helpful when writing a cover letter for a specific employer. You could provide it with context about that employer, about that role, so that it'll understand, what will be relevant to your audience. Next there, we have flipped interaction pattern. This is a format that has the AI tool ask you questions instead of the other way around. And I'll actually give you a demonstration of this later because this format can be incredibly helpful if you want to practice your interviewing skills. Then we have chain of thought prompting. This is where you break complex tasks into smaller tasks or into like a series of logical steps, which can help you yield more accurate or useful results. Sometimes if you throw too much information at the AI tool, it will get a little confused or leave out certain requests that you included there. And this chain of thought prompting is a good method, for example, when writing your resume, because you could ask for sample bullet points, just one job at a time, or even one bullet point at a time, rather than asking for an entire sample resume all at once, which could lead to an increased instance of inaccuracies. And then lastly, we have the refinement prompt pattern. This is an interesting one. It's essentially getting the AI tool to help you create better questions or prompts to ask it by having it suggest them to you. And kind of the easiest way to use the refinement prompt is to simply say something like, what prompt should I give you to get you to do X? And this type of format or prompt pattern here is really useful if you are just starting out using AI tools and you want to kind of quickly learn how to give better prompts. Because remember, the quality of output depends on the quality of your prompts. Okay, so now that we've compared the two main tools we're focusing on and gone over some best practices, we will start diving into some specific job search related ways that you can use these tools, beginning with conducting research. So for each topic, I will first kind of break down some of the ways that you can use these different AI tools in the context of that topic. And then on the following slide, I'll give you some sample prompts that you can actually use yourself. And I've also included a few videos in this webinar to give you an actual demonstration of how to use some of these prompts with ChatGPT and Gemini. So hopefully that will be helpful to you as well. But in terms of conducting research, which is something that is highly recommended at the initial stages of your search because you want to be, well informed during your job search. These are kind of the main areas where AI can be beneficial in that research. And first one there, analyze job postings. I love, like I said, using AI to analyze job postings because it's a really quick and easy way to identify some of the key elements of the role, which can be helpful for a number of reasons. Maybe doing this can help me kind of quickly decide if the job is a good fit for me without me having to read the entire job posting of every potential job that I come across. It can help me pick out important, keywords, phrases, skills, expectations, etc., that I can then use to tailor my application materials. Or it can simply help me learn about different types of roles. And I would probably use both ChatGPT and Gemini for analyzing postings and then compare the results. The next one there, getting help with researching companies is also a nice aspect of using these tools because you can ask specific questions about a particular organization and get a concise summary without having to scour the internet to learn about, their mission, their culture, values, competitors, marketing position, or other types of important information. And for this function, I would be more inclined to use Gemini since it has that, consistent, up-to-date, real-time information like we talked about. ChatGPT could provide you with a solid overview, but if there have been any kind of major changes with the company since the last time ChatGPT was updated, you could encounter some inaccurate or incomplete information. In terms of identifying industry trends, this is helpful if you're looking to potentially make a career change, or maybe you want to learn about in-demand roles or skill sets, or just want to stay informed about your particular field or industry, which is always a good idea. And again, I would probably lean towards using Gemini for this one, but it would be worth checking ChatGPT as well. Fumbling over my words. Sorry about that. And the same, what we just mentioned with identifying industry trends, the same also applies to understanding best practices and learning emerging technologies. It's important to stay well informed, and this type of information is also particularly helpful when making a career change. And again, you could go with either tool here, but Gemini would have the slight edge because it would be more up to date. So here on this slide, you'll see some sample prompts that you could use for each of the research aspects that we went over on the previous slide. And you wouldn't have to use these exact prompts, but they can provide you kind of a good framework or starting point to use, and then you could kind of create your own variations. And just as a quick reminder, you will be getting a copy of this webinar recording, so please don't feel like you have to frantically write down these prompts before we go on to the next slide. But a couple of things to point out with these prompts. For that first one, which mentions that you want the AI tool to work with a specific job description, I made sure to note there in parentheses that it's helpful to hold shift and press enter a few times to skip down a couple lines and then paste in the job description, just so you can kind of keep that information separate and avoid confusion there. And the same would also work for like inputting your resume or a cover letter or really any other body of text. For the second prompt there, you can see that I'm specifically asking about the culture, mission, values, competitors, etc. You could ask that all at once, or you could use sort of that chain of thought prompt pattern where you ask them kind of individually to avoid that confusion. Whatever is easiest for you. And then with those last three, you could kind of play around with including, just the job title, just the industry type, or both of those pieces of information at the same time to see if you get different results. Totally up to you how you would want to format these prompts, but they can provide you with a good starting point, like I mentioned, until you kind of really get the hang of things. Okay, so on this slide, I've included a video that demonstrates how you can use some of the prompts that we just went over on the previous slide. So let's go ahead and give this a watch. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually test out a few variations of some of the prompts that we looked at on that previous slide. And for this first one, I'm going to use ChatGPT because I'm asking it to analyze a job description for me. And in terms of my own personal preferences, I tend to like the way that ChatGPT is able to, summarize and break down and analyze bodies of text more so than Gemini. Gemini is perfectly capable of doing this. And of course, you could use them in tandem and kind of compare and contrast or mix and match the results. But we're going to go ahead and use ChatGPT for this one. I also like to hold shift, press enter a couple times to skip down a few lines. That way I can make sure there's no confusion about where my prompt ends and the job description begins. So I'll go ahead then and paste in that job description and hit enter. Now, this job description is just sort of a random customer success manager role that I found on the FlexJobs site. And you can see ChatGPT is breaking down the key requirements. It's probably going to go into expectations or qualifications next, but this is really helpful information for me for a few reasons. Let's say that I'm already an experienced customer success manager and I'm looking at lots of different job descriptions and I just want to save some time finding ones that are the right fit for me. I could have an AI tool like this break this down so that I can kind of look at it a bit more quickly and decide yes or no, do I want to apply for this role? Maybe I have already decided that I do want to apply for this role, and now I'm making sure that I fully understand the type of things that I will want to incorporate into my resume, into my cover letter, as I'm tailoring my application materials, or the things that I want to, include in my interview responses. And then a third reason that this could be helpful is if I'm thinking about making a change to customer success management and I'm just using job descriptions and AI analyzing those job descriptions as a way to learn more. And keep in mind, you are able to ask, like follow-up questions. So let's see, maybe I want to know more about like this technical aptitude aspect. So I could say, what more can you tell me about the necessary technical aptitude of CSMs? And then ChatGPT will provide me with some additional information so that I could kind of continue, learning and making sure that I am, operating from a well-informed position, which is important in the job search. Now for the next one, let's go ahead and jump over to Gemini, and I will quickly copy the prompt I have saved on my other screen. So for this one, I want to use Gemini because I am going to be asking, as you'll see with this prompt, I'm asking about the current state of the remote job market for the healthcare industry. So I want a tool that can provide me that consistent, real-time, up-to-date access to the internet. So we'll go ahead and click enter there. And then it is going to provide me with some helpful information. And the reason that I chose remote and healthcare is I think that a lot of times with the healthcare industry, we think that that's a primarily in-person industry, but we can see here that's not necessarily the case. The remote job market for the healthcare industry is actually growing. It's telling us about some of the availability of remote positions. It's showing us some of the jobs that are seeing that growth. It's giving us some tips here for ways that we could identify remote jobs within that industry. So some helpful information here if I'm looking for remote and the healthcare industry, but you could of course use this with any type of industry as well. And like we mentioned, if we were to click this G button right here, Gemini would then show the sources that it got this information from. So if I wanted to do some additional research on my own, then I could, of course, go ahead and do that. Let me go ahead and open up another chat and we'll ask one more prompt. So let's say that I want to know about the emerging technologies that are currently impacting the world of remote work. If I have been working in person and now I want to shift to a remote environment, it would be helpful for me to do this type of research. So let's see what it says. Okay, so this is interesting. So it's not necessarily focusing on too much in terms of kind of the standard, tools that are out there in terms of like video conferencing and messaging. It's going a little bit higher level. It's got extended reality, augmented reality, virtual reality, talking about the metaverse here, talking about AI, advanced communication, like hologram communication. So really kind of getting a little bit futuristic on us here. But just like with ChatGPT, I could ask a follow-up prompt. So I could say, how is AI impacting remote work? It gave me a little bit of information here, but I want to know more. So I could put in that follow-up prompt and ask that question then. Now it's giving me some great information about how it's helping us automate tasks and improve communication and enhance collaboration. So just good details to, sort of help me kickstart or initiate some of my research and information gathering stages of my job search. So hopefully that demonstration was helpful for you. I imagine it would be particularly helpful if you haven't used, one or both of these AI tools before. So I wanted to make sure to include a couple videos in this webinar. But let's go ahead now and look at networking. Networking is another area, believe it or not, where AI can be beneficial, which is good because, networking can be a major source of confusion and anxiety for a lot of us. So just like with conducting research, I will give you some sample prompts that you can use to support these aspects of your networking efforts. But let me first provide some context for each of the topics on this slide. In terms of those first two topics, we often hear networking advice related to establishing an effective personal brand or optimizing our LinkedIn or other online professional profiles so that recruiters and hiring managers, will find us more easily and like what they see. But, it can be hard to determine what these things actually mean or how we should do these types of things. And your personal brand and your online profiles, they should be unique to you, but there are definitely some ways that AI can help you in generating ideas for how to brand yourself and what to include in your profile, like specific, field or industry or role specific keywords, skills, and experiences. That way you can, make sure that you are portraying yourself as highly relevant. You're improving your searchability and your visibility and trying to appeal to others within your industry. And in terms of your industry, AI can also be useful in growing your network by identifying thought leaders that you can follow and learn from, as well as others within your specific field or industry subset that you could attempt to potentially connect and build relationships with. And once you get some suggestions from AI, you can use those individuals as kind of a starting point by then paying attention to, who they follow or interact with regularly, which will help you then kind of continue to grow your network of potential connections and further build new relationships. And as an FYI, Gemini is likely best suited for both of these strategies here. And when it comes to growing your network and building and strengthening relationships, it's absolutely crucial that you are working to form, a common bond with people by personalizing your outreach messages and posting insightful comments on the things that they might share online. So that way they understand why you're reaching out to them, and you can demonstrate that, you genuinely value them and their expertise that they share with others. And establishing this type of common bond and aiming to engage with others is essential to good networking, but that can be one of the major challenges for many of us, especially if we've never done it before or maybe we're lacking confidence. But thankfully, AI can support you by providing some sample messages that you could write, or give you ideas on how to maybe comment on someone else's post or their online content in a meaningful way, which will help you, establish and start to strengthen those relationships. But just remember, use those samples as an idea generator rather than having them, write your actual messages or comments for you, because people can often tell when something is completely AI written, and that will leave a bad impression on someone that you're trying to build a relationship with. So you want to avoid that from happening. So here now we have some sample prompts that you could potentially use for each of the topics from that previous slide. And I'll also give a friendly reminder that you will get a copy of this recording, so you'll be able to review these later. And again, a few things to point out with these prompts. You'll see that the first two there would have you include a job title. This is because, even like we talked about, your brand and your profile should be unique to you. There are going to be some commonalities based on your type of role and your specific industry or field of interest. The next two there are pretty self-explanatory. Just remember that it's more effective to, follow and engage with these types of individuals, see who they engage with, so that you can, hopefully start to establish a common bond with them before attempting to, connect with them, add them to your network, or, request any type of potential favor from them. You want to establish that relationship first. And then, like I mentioned on the last slide, you want to make sure that you are taking the time to personalize your outreach messages and leave insightful comments on the posts of others. Just make sure that you are editing the examples that the AI tools will give you and injecting your own style so they don't sound, robotic. I've worked with AI tools a lot, and I've heard from others that are kind of in the same boat there. And it's pretty easy to tell when someone is relying solely on AI to do their writing for them. And it's kind of a bad look. You probably won't encounter anybody, like calling you out for that, but they're probably going to be less likely to engage with you if it's obvious that your responses or comments are AI generated. And it's not included on this slide, but if you get to the point where you want to start creating and posting your own industry specific content, you can use AI to help you generate ideas for things to talk about or assist you with breaking through your writer's block. But again, use it as just an idea generator to support you in creating your own content. All right, so now we'll talk about the ways that you can use AI to help enhance your application materials, primarily meaning your resume and cover letter. I already mentioned how you should avoid having AI write your full resume and cover letter for you, but AI can be extremely helpful with understanding your audience and identifying keywords and phrases that will be impactful to them or matter to them, both of which involve analyzing the job description to help you pinpoint what is going to be relevant, appealing, and attention grabbing for the recruiter or hiring manager. And you can get help. This also will help you with potential, AI screenings that might score or rank your application materials based on the appearance of certain keywords. Fumbling over my words a little bit there again, I apologize. You could also use AI to help you showcase your value by asking it for examples based on your own resume and a job description, kind of, comparing the two together. This can help give you ideas of, what kind of, quantifiable metrics or success stories you might want to include in your materials to demonstrate your potential positive impact. In terms of writing your resume summary, writing your bullet points, or writing cover letters, it can be helpful to use STAR stories. STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. And it's a storytelling framework or method that allows you to provide context, demonstrate your impact, and highlight your achievements. But it can be tricky to do if you haven't, if you're not familiar with that method. So you can use AI, ask AI for some help with using the STAR method. And for that last one, it's also really helpful to review samples when you're trying to learn how to do something yourself, like write a cover letter. And AI can give you those samples and those examples that are specifically tailored to your particular situation. Here are some sample prompts that can help you with the topics on the previous slide. And again, you don't have to use these exact prompts. You could just use them as sort of a base or a framework to create your own variations that might work better for you. And in terms of understanding your audience and identifying keywords and phrases, these prompts can help you better, understand the types of things that will be relevant and impactful to your specific audience. And it can be really helpful to try these with both ChatGPT and Gemini with every job that you are planning to apply for. This will also help you think of some topics that you'll likely want to discuss in an interview, which we'll be talking about in our next section. For getting help with showcasing your unique value, you could try a few variations of this prompt. For example, you could just tell it the type of job you've held. You could provide it with a summary of some of the things that you've done or accomplished, or you could provide it with your actual resume, or you could try all three of those options and then sort of compare the results. But either way, that prompt can give you some ideas for the things you could potentially include and maybe even quantify to better illustrate your achievements and paint a clearer picture of the potential positive impact or value that you bring to the table. And the prompt for telling STAR stories, that one's pretty self-explanatory, but this is definitely a good one to use if you are struggling to come up with STAR stories on your own and you want some assistance. Just make sure that you're providing it with enough detail and context so that the example it gives you will make sense and be relevant and accurate to your experience. And then for our tailored samples, you can see I also included a 350 word limit when requesting a cover letter, because you want a cover letter that is clear and concise and stays on just one page. So that is another way that you can provide that kind of detail for AI tools to make sure that they are giving you an output that is going to meet your specifications. And hopefully these prompts can help you start generating some good ideas for what you can write about in your application materials and help you break through that potential writer's block. Okay, now we will finish up our main presentation with one of my favorite ways to use AI to support your job search, which is interview preparation. If you are anything like me, interviews can be really stressful for you, but taking the time to prepare effectively can minimize that stress. It can help you project confidence, and it's going to improve your ability to demonstrate how you're a strong fit for the position. And AI can be an incredibly helpful tool to support your interview preparation efforts. A tried and true way of preparing for interviews is to consider some common interview questions so that you can kind of get yourself in the right frame of mind. But what is common can change and shift over time. So consider hopping on Gemini. You could try ChatGPT as well and asking for some common interview questions to consider. Similarly, along those same lines, you can also use either ChatGPT or Gemini to review some role-specific questions by including the job description in your prompt so that you can see some examples of the type of questions your interviewer might ask you related to that specific role or position. And then you can get feedback on your potential answers by writing out sample responses to those questions or just asking for suggestions on how to potentially answer the questions that it provides you so that you can then strengthen the quality of your responses. And you could even use the persona prompting format to get an AI tool to conduct a mock interview with you, which you will actually see demonstrated in a video on an upcoming slide. Storytelling is an important aspect of your interview as well, because you want to take more of the show rather than tell approach, where you're sharing stories and specific examples from your past that will actually highlight the skills and abilities you possess. So using AI to identify potential discussion topics and help you brainstorm some of those stories that you want to tell can be really helpful. It's also important to ask some strategic questions at the end of an interview, but it can be tough to know what questions to ask. So thankfully, again, ChatGPT and Gemini can help with this. Just include, the job description and maybe some additional background information on the company or the role, and they can then present you with some solid questions to consider asking your interviewer. And then just like crafting a personalized outreach message or connection request, AI can help you write a genuine professional thank you message after an interview or a follow-up message if you haven't heard back from the employer yet. Once again, here are some sample prompts that you could use to help with your preparation efforts. With that first prompt, you could simply ask for common job interview questions, or you could ask for common questions with the job title included in your prompt. Both will yield different but helpful results. Similarly, with that second one, it's worth trying it using the specific job description, as well as simply using the job title and industry type. That way you can get a wider range of potential role-specific questions to consider. For the prompt about receiving feedback, you could use it as is on the slide there, or you could use that as a follow-up for one of the first two prompts, since the AI tool will remember your conversation up to that point, and you won't have to retype the question just to ask about your sample answer. With identifying discussion topics, this is another one that you could try with the specific job description, as well as just the job title and the industry type, in order to consider a broader range of potential topics. And then the last two are fairly self-explanatory as well. With the last one, I formatted it as a follow-up that I would likely send about a week or so after an interview, but you could easily rework it to give you a thank you message that you could send immediately after an interview instead. Regardless, both of these types of messages, they should be clear, concise, and kind of reiterate your interest in and fit for the job. Okay, so before we start wrapping up the presentation and moving on to our Q&A, I do want to show you a quick video that will demonstrate a few of these interview prep strategies, including a demonstration of how to get ChatGPT to conduct a mock interview with you. So let's go ahead now and take a look. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and walk you through two of my favorite strategies for using AI tools to prepare for an upcoming interview. And for the first one here, I'm going to use Gemini. You could use ChatGPT, but I just decided to use Gemini for this example. So you can see that I already have my prompt in here. It says, based on the following job description, what are 15 role-specific questions that I might be asked in an interview for this position? And the reason that I like this strategy is considering, common interview questions is a good method of preparation. It can help you start to be, thinking along the right lines. It can help you start to consider what you might want to say in your different responses or some of the topics you might want to talk about. And then if you can get role specific questions that are tailored to a particular job description, well, that just kind of takes that preparation method, up a couple more levels. So really just a nice method of preparing for interviews, and AI makes it really easy to do this. So we've got our prompt in there. I'm now going to hold shift, press enter twice just to skip down, go ahead and paste in the job description. And this job description is just kind of a general accountant role, again, that I found on FlexJobs. So let's see what Gemini comes up with. Okay, so it's giving us 15 role specific questions, but it also looks like it's breaking those questions into different categories, even though I didn't necessarily ask it to do that. But that's really cool to me because, now I could say like, well, what are three more questions about general ledger and transactions? Or I could say, what are some other things that they might ask me about collaboration and management or something like that. So it just kind of, makes it easy to follow up, but it's also nice to have it broken into those categories. And another interesting thing that you can do with this strategy is I could then say like, okay, well, for question number 3, what if I said something like this? And I could type out a sample response and then it would give me feedback on that response. Or I could say, for question number 7, what if I talked about X, Y, and Z? And it would tell me like yes or no, those are good topics to include or not, or it might give me some ideas of other topics to talk about instead. Or I could say, just flat out, like, I have no idea how to answer question number 12. What do you recommend? And then it could provide me with some suggestions there. So just a really neat strategy for preparing for job interviews. And for our next one, we're going to go ahead and jump over to ChatGPT, and I'll show you how you can actually conduct a mock interview of sorts using AI tools. So let's go ahead and paste in our prompt here. And it says, I want you to act as a recruiter looking to fill an entry-level customer service position at a B2C company. Please interview me for this role. I would like you to ask me one question at a time. I will then type my response to your question, and you can then ask me your next question. After I have answered a few questions, I will then ask you to provide me with some feedback on the quality of my responses and how they can be improved. Begin. So you can see with this prompt, like I'm trying to be very detailed, very clear with my instructions so that it doesn't get confused. So you want to make sure that you keep that in mind because the quality of the output that you receive from these tools is very dependent on the quality of the input or the prompts that you are using. So let's go ahead and see if I was clear enough and it understands what I want it to do. Okay, and it looks like it is certainly understanding what I want it to do. So it's saying, let's get started. Can you tell me about your previous experience, if any, in customer service roles? And I'll, just for the sake of this example, give some really brief or concise responses. And I'll say, I have a lot of experience answering customer questions from past jobs. So not a great response, but just trying to move through a couple questions for the sake of this example. And says, that sounds valuable. So it's being very kind. Could you elaborate on the types of questions you typically handled and how you address them? So I would say, customers were often confused about how to use our product. So I was able to give clear instructions. Okay, so again, just not a great response, but trying to move through this example. So it's saying, that's important. Again, it's being very kind. How did you ensure that customers were satisfied with the assistance you provided? So again, asking me some really good questions here, kind of basing its next question off of, something that I brought up in my response to its previous question, which is interesting. But now I'm going to tell it that I'm done with its questions and I want some feedback. So I'll say, please now provide me with some feedback on my responses. I want to know how I can improve. Okay, so now it's given me some pretty detailed feedback. So it's saying that, I have relevant experience, but to, enhance my answers, I could provide some specific examples or anecdotes to illustrate my experiences, giving me, some examples of the types of anecdotes or examples I could provide. So really some helpful information here that I could then, apply in a real world interview setting. So that's why these are, two of my favorite strategies for preparing for interviews using AI tools. They can give me those sort of tailored, sample questions, provide me with some solid feedback, and really just help me prepare effectively. Hopefully that was helpful for you. Like I said before, interviewing can be tough, but AI tools can definitely help you improve the effectiveness of your preparation efforts. Okay, so as we close out here, just a few action steps and reminders to kind of think about going forward. So the first one there, consider using AI tools to support your job search efforts, because using AI as your job search assistant, doesn't just save you time, it will also enhance the quality of your work once you get the hang of using these tools. Test out different tools to see which ones you prefer, because each tool has its own unique qualities, and you might find that certain ones are more effective than others for you. Try different prompts and see which work best, because like we mentioned, using AI effectively really all comes down to the quality of your prompts. And then remember to use them to enhance your work, not to do everything for you, because you want to use them to help you be better, not to replace you entirely, especially when it comes to job searching, where your individual insights and personal touch are needed. Okay, so we will now move on to the Q&A portion of our webinar. As a reminder, a copy of the recording as well as resources shared will be emailed within the next week. Do be sure to check your spam folder just in case it gets filtered there. For even more tips, tricks, and resources, I recommend going to the FlexJobs blog. You'll see the URL there on the screen. Now let's go ahead and open up to your questions. Please remember to type them into the Q&A area rather than the chat section, and feel free to give a thumbs up to anyone else's question that you'd also like to have answered, so we know which are the most popular. All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and move into the Q&A portion of the webinar now. Before we dive into your questions, could someone let me know in the chat section if you're able to hear me clearly? All right, wonderful. Thank you for that. So my name is Keith Spencer, and I'm one of our career experts here at FlexJobs, and I will be answering your questions for you. So let's head on over to that Q&A tab together. And our first question here that has the most upvotes, it says, how can we utilize AI to break through ATS walls? So if you aren't familiar with ATS, it means applicant tracking system. An applicant tracking system or an ATS are pieces of software that recruiters and hiring managers will use to kind of, I hear them most often described as like a filing cabinet. They kind of organize and store all of the candidates for different positions that the company is hiring for. And some of these applicant tracking systems do have the ability to, sort of screen your resume, like look for certain criteria, certain keywords, certain phrases, and then apply like a score or a rank to your application. And you typically are still going to have your application reviewed by an actual human before they decide yes or no, we want to move forward with this person or not. But theoretically, if your application receives a higher score or a higher rank, it will more likely get noticed by the recruiter or the hiring manager. So just want to throw that background in there. But in terms of utilizing AI to help with applicant tracking systems, my biggest recommendation would be using a prompt that has it analyze a job description and pick out keywords and phrases and skills and things like that that seem as though they are going to be kind of integral or highly essential to that role, and then trying to find a way to incorporate whether myself or with the help of an AI tool, finding a way to incorporate those into my resume, into my cover letter, things like that. But I do, a word of caution here, a lot of people make the mistake of kind of what we call like keyword stuffing. If you are simply considering the ATS and not considering the human that will eventually be reading your resume as well, and you just try to cram in all these different keywords, but you're not providing context behind those keywords, well, then once a human actually reads your resume, they're going to think, this person just doesn't know what they're talking about. They just crammed in all these things that they thought we wanted to see, but there's no context here. There's no background or anything like that. So you want to make sure that you're finding that sort of nice balance. But to get back to your initial question, having an AI tool analyze job descriptions for you and help suggest some of those high priority keywords and phrases, that's going to be your best bet there. And then just finding ways with context to incorporate those into your resume. And I guess a real quick example of what I mean by like with context is like, let's say that you see like problem solving mentioned a couple times in a job description. So you're thinking, okay, problem solving is a key skill they want me to have. That's a key word that I should include in my resume. And you just list problem solving in your list of key skills, but you never actually give any examples of how you've solved problems or identified problems or developed creative solutions. That is not going to give anybody confidence that you are actually a good problem solver. So you need that context. You need to kind of tell the story or give the example a little bit more thoroughly, not just worry about your rank or score from the applicant tracking system. So there's definitely a balance to be had there. So hopefully that is helpful for you. Good question, and I appreciate you taking the time to ask that. Okay, so our next one here, is it possible to use AI to filter out job search or to filter out job search websites and pick and suggest the job posts that suit your skills, background, and needs? So I have not used any specifically. I am aware of some different tools that are out there that I'm not going to share names because I haven't used them specifically. So I don't want to, give any bad advice here. But I have not used any specifically. I know that there are some AI tools that you can apparently sort of input some criteria, share some information about yourself, and then just kind of have it go at it, applying for jobs or suggesting jobs, things like that. The reviews of these kind of tools that I have read are pretty negative. Like people say that it kind of starts out in a promising way, and it'll maybe apply for a couple jobs that seem aligned with your skills and interests and background, but then it kind of goes off the rails. I've seen some reviews talking about, it was actually a whole like blog post that somebody had tried a couple different of these and tested them out, and they said that it managed to find like an old cover letter that was like attached to like their Indeed profile or something like that, and started sending that out. So it was a cover letter that was like referencing a specific company and sending it out to other companies. So really, I think that that's something that is highly sophisticated technology that just isn't there yet. Like maybe one day in the future we'll have some tools that are good at doing that, but to my knowledge there are none that are very good. So kind of use at your own risk if that sounds like something that you want to pursue. But even if the tools were sophisticated enough, I would still recommend against doing that, because you still want to add your own personal touch. You don't want to be sending out the same generic resume. You don't want to just be sending out the same cookie cutter cover letter. So you need to make sure that you have that kind of human in the loop, so to speak, to put your own touch on things, to really customize things appropriately. But I'm a big proponent of the quality over quantity approach to using AI. So that's why, instead of using a tool that can kind of automatically do the things that you're talking about here in your question, I would rather use it to work with it to analyze a job posting that I find, to see, to summarize it for me, to make it a lot quicker, to determine whether or not I want to apply for that job. So it can still save you a ton of time, because we're talking about reading it's taking a minute or two to read a summary versus 5 to 10 minutes to analyze an entire job posting, only to find out, oh, I don't want to apply for this job anyway. So you could over time save hours and hours. But I think having it do all this stuff for you is probably not a great idea. Now you could say, You could also another way to do kind of what you're talking about, but in a way where the human is in the loop. There would be to go, to like a Gemini or another tool with that kind of like search capability, and say like, I'm interested in this type of job. What type of companies are typically hiring for that type of role? You could ask if it has access to or knows of like current job postings for that type of role, where you do put in your skills, your background, your needs, the things that you mentioned there. So you could find some like workarounds, but if you wanted to do like all that kind of filtering for you, and picking and suggesting posts for you, like that's where you're probably going to run into issues, and even more issues if you want to find a job that will actually do, or excuse me, an AI tool that will actually do the applying to jobs for you as well. So just kind of wanted to throw out a little bit of caution there, but really good question, interesting question. And like I said, it's very possible that we might see that, a couple years down the road, or 5 or 10 years down the road. But I think that something that's going to, kind of replace you in the job search. There's a lot of risk involved there. So just be cautious, I guess, is what I'm saying. But good question. Thank you for asking that. Let's move on to our next one here. All right. So this is another really good question. So this person is asking, can employers tell or check if your resume was produced with AI? So there are, companies out there, and I believe some of the applicant tracking systems that we talked of earlier are trying to develop, certain tools and features that can try to screen, a document to see like, was it produced by AI? But I've also, same kind of thing, like I've read a lot of mixed reviews on those types of programs. I've seen, for example, like teachers want to be able to use them because they want to know, is my student actually doing the work, or are they having AI do all the work for them? And I've read horror stories about students that really did create all the content themselves, like do their assignment entirely themselves, and then one of these tools said, nope, it's AI generated, falsely. So, I don't think employers are putting a lot of stake into those types of tools yet. They might get more sophisticated, just like the other types of tools we were talking about a moment ago. But one thing I will say is that if you are not using it as was recommended in the presentation, like using AI as was recommended in the presentation, and are instead having it do all the work for you using the exact text that it provides, then employers are going to start to be able to tell. I have seen like recruiters, for example, posting on LinkedIn about how the posts that I've seen more often than not deal with like application questions, but they say like, really weird that I had 20 candidates who applied for this job who had a near exact copy of one another in this question for this application. So you just really want to be careful there. There are also certain like kind of tells, so to speak, like different AI tools like have kind of their habits almost. Because if you think about it, so like the way that they're sort of like generating and predicting the text that they're providing you is that they've been trained on these massive amounts of data and information, and then they are literally just like statistically predicting the most likely and logical word to come next. Like that's how they're sort of forming these sentences based on the input that you provide it and things like that. So there are like little habits that they can fall into, like certain words that they might use, or certain styles of writing and things like that. So if the employer, the reason I'm bringing this up is because if the employer, the recruiter, the hiring manager, whoever at the company is someone like me who uses AI a lot, chances are good they're going to know what's happening. Like for example, like I post on LinkedIn pretty frequently, and people will like comment on my posts, and I'll respond back to them and stuff. But often more so occasionally people occasionally, that in a way that I can detect, people will post comments that are pretty clearly written by AI. And just to be polite, I'll still respond, but like, it kind of, it impacts your opinion of people. Like if they're just kind of doing the easy way out, having AI do all the work for them, like that's going to impact your opinion of people. So same kind of thing with your application materials. That's why I tried to emphasize, in the presentation, keep that human in the loop, use it as your idea generator, but don't have it replace you. You can, have it craft, really nice tailored samples that you can then kind of use as inspiration for your own work, but having it do all the writing for you, there's a lot of risk involved there. And to me, that risk is not worth it. So I will hop off my soapbox there, but hopefully that was helpful information, and that was a really good question. So thank you for asking that. So we're getting close to time here. I'm going to try to squeeze in, one or two more questions here. So this person is saying, what are your thoughts on MS Copilot? I've never used ChatGPT or Gemini. So I have not used MS Copilot. I've talked to some people who have. My understanding is it works very much similarly to ChatGPT and Google Gemini. Just in the way that, like Gemini, for example, can be integrated into like Google Workspace. Microsoft Copilot can be integrated into the different applications in Microsoft 365. So that's pretty nice. But in terms of like which one's better or which one's worse, like I really can't necessarily say there. But honestly, like to me, so I've tried, there are four different tools that I use regularly. And I've tried probably a dozen different tools, and really like the capabilities are pretty similar across most tools. So like I can't necessarily say like, oh, I tried this tool and it was bad. It's more of just like, oh, I tried this tool and like the user interface wasn't for me, or I tried this tool but I found that this other tool met my preferences a little bit better. So I always say to people, like, test out different ones, find the ones that are right for you. Like all the prompts that we shared today, those could be used on any tool. It doesn't have to be ChatGPT or Google's Gemini. So do some exploring, try things out. Just make sure that you're using it appropriately, like we've talked about, and also just being careful with what kind of potentially sensitive or personal information you might be sharing. So you could also read reviews, like like most people, when I'm buying stuff online, I want to look at reviews, see how other people felt about it and stuff like that. So it certainly doesn't hurt to check out different like blog posts or articles or reviews on different tools as well. So hopefully that is helpful for you. I know it wasn't a direct answer, but I just haven't used MS Copilot myself, so can't speak to that directly. But definitely a good question, and whatever you end up trying, I hope it works well for you. Okay, let's fit in one, maybe two more. Okay, so this person is saying, is it worth paying for the premium versions of these AI tools? If so, what's the best one to help with our job search, in your opinion? So again, like I have only used like the free version. Like I've gotten a little sample of like the paid version of ChatGPT since they started kind of allowing like limited access to their paid framework. And it does seem, pretty powerful and cool. But at the same time, like until they did that, like I've been getting along for over a year now, just using the free version. So you could. I don't know, having not used like the premium versions of different tools, I can't confidently say like, yep, it's worth it. It's going to be able to do so many other things for you. Like I've just kept it to free because, I don't necessarily feel like spending my own money on these tools. And I also want to speak to it in a way that's going to be most accessible to, the job seekers that I share information with through like these webinars. So, I've got along fine with the free ones. So, I guess I'll just kind of leave it at that. So sorry that was another one I couldn't directly answer your question, but hopefully that information is still helpful for you. Okay, so all right, I'm gonna squeeze in two more quick questions because there's one that I want to get to that's actually the second from the top right now. So this person is saying that they heard that copying and pasting from ChatGPT to a document on your computer may contain malware. Is that true? So I have not heard that. But I suppose that like theoretically it could be possible. Like maybe if an AI tool like gave you like potentially a malicious link, or perhaps there was like some like hidden code or something in there. But I think the likelihood of that happening is pretty minimal. But again, like a surefire way of keeping yourself safe from that happening is to just not copy and paste from these tools. Like again, if you're just kind of using it as like an idea generator, uh, and then you're doing like the typing on whatever document you're working on, and just kind of using it to help you generate some ideas of your own to write or expand upon on your own, then you're not going to run into that issue. But that's another one. Like I guess theoretically it's possible. I think the likelihood of it happening is very, very small. But I wouldn't say definitively like no, that's not true, or yes, that's true. But it just kind of goes back to like using these tools appropriately, and just making sure that you're keeping yourself safe. So hopefully that is helpful for you. And then one last question, this quick one. So can you post a link to your LinkedIn profile and ChatGPT would give suggestions for improving it? I have tried doing stuff like that, not necessarily with my LinkedIn, but like, giving it a link and saying like, can you summarize this article using just the link? And I've gotten some mixed results with different tools. Like I think it's better to just like copy and paste. Like, so if we're talking about your LinkedIn profile, I would want to use like the chain of thought prompting technique anyway. Because if I gave it like my entire profile all at once, and asked it to analyze it and suggest improvements, like it could get a little mixed up as it goes along, or like stop generating output, or stop generating output that's useful for me. So I would probably recommend like, here's my about section of my LinkedIn profile. Could you suggest some improvements that I could potentially make? Or here's my description of one of my jobs from my LinkedIn profile. Could you suggest some improvements? That's what I would recommend doing. Because, if you just like, if you give it too much, like sometimes it can get a little confused there. So, I would just, for me personally, for the simplicity of it, I would probably just go with the chain of thought kind of prompting technique where you're working on it sort of one step at a time. Okay, so we're quite a few minutes over our allotted time together. So let's go ahead and draw to a close. Really appreciate you all taking the time to be here today. Sincerely hope that both the presentation and the Q&A were helpful for you. Definitely recommend that you come to some of our future webinars if you are interested and available. Tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern, we have one about teachers specifically kind of leveraging their transferable skills to successfully change careers, but it really does have material in that webinar that would be applicable and relevant to anyone considering a career change. So you can consider checking that out. And then Thursday, June 6th at 2 p.m., we have one all about ageism and the remote job search, some tips to land a remote job at any age. So once again, thank you all for being here. Really appreciate your time. Hope that this was very helpful, and I wish you all the best of luck with your job search. Take care.